Well, any games that you guys are excited about coming out? Because Starfield's right around the corner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are, let's see. Let me rack my brain here.
I I
I actually am
first
kind of pumped on the Armored Core that just came out, only because
yeah, Armored Core 6.
Armored
Yeah,
Core was like that was like OG PS1, the first game I think I had. I think it might have been a demo that like shipped with PS1, and
right,
I saw a lot of stuff about I saw a lot of like pre-release footage where they didn't even release the footage with the UI. Speaking of
right.
user interface and user experience stuff, no UI on all the early in-game demos, and it was just watching, and now I've seen that I recently watched the actual launch trailer, fully fledged, and I'm like, after watching a few YouTube walkthroughs of people just being like, I got hands on, 2 weeks prior to launch, and it's just like an incredibly well crafted game and it's enjoyable to play. I was like, I think the mix of nostalgia and just the way the game looks, and of course I love mechs, so I think
Right.
Armored
oh
Core might
yeah.
be my next purchase.
Nice.
Yeah, my game. I mean, I'm definitely gonna get Armored Core for all of the nostalgia. I mean, and there's just something fun too about customizing. I
Yeah.
wish more games had more customizing features. When you get
Right.
that control, even if it's just paint jobs, on a car, like you can sit there for an hour just, messing with the hue slider. I'm very excited for Armored Core. They've always had some really good customized options. But I just beat Final Fantasy 16 like a week and a half ago, two
How
weeks
was
ago.
it?
So interestingly enough, and this is something maybe just going into the Unreal space, I find a lot of times that in those games they have like a darker, more like monochromatic, like not very saturated feel to them.
Right.
And I felt like this kind of had that feel. And I was like, it wasn't some of the Final Fantasies have very bright pops of color. And so it was very much, I'm sure as anybody's seen the reviews, like it was like literally Game of Thrones meets Final Fantasy. I
That's what I
and I
heard.
was
Yeah.
actually shocked how much blood there was and how many
Oh
people
wow.
are just getting picked off left and right. And it wasn't like, they usually just like kind of like flutter into little feathers and butterflies when they get stabbed. Like, no, they were like
That went there.
losing
Yeah.
limbs. Yo, I couldn't believe it. So it was very entertaining in some of those aspects. And the story, again, very Game of Thrones, like super long. I mean, some people that are, if you love Game of Thrones and you like Final Fantasy, this is the game. But there were some things like I've always found one of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy were having like those mini games. There
Right.
was no mini games in this one. I don't
Oh,
know. So there was
Oh,
like
no
really?
a lot.
no chocobo racing.
No chocobo racing. There was so
Are there
much.
chocobos at all or no?
No, there is.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully, there is. But the lore on the chocobos was a little lack. But there was just. But I would say honestly, it was probably like my third favorite Final Fantasy. To be honest, I think it was just a little long, and they could have added a little more saturation and color, and it could have had just more, like I said, customizable things. Like I wish some of the side missions, like you could have affected your area, like, oh, you can go out and collect flowers and then more flowers would be around your home base, or you can like collect items and kind of build your little area. But that's what I thought. But the games I'm also excited about are the Final Fantasy 7 remake, and then
Oh
Right.
yeah. Part
the,
2.
the part two, and then they're also doing like all of the Final Fantasy lore into one Final Fantasy game, and it like
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
cut out some BS, and it's going to be a little bit faster, and it's coming out on mobile like next month. So I am
Hmm.
Interesting.
super stoked for that. And last but not least, I think honestly after that, this is going to sound silly, but I might be taking a break from any game that's not VR and just really try and get myself more into only doing VR stuff. But that's something I haven't mentioned before, but that's just something I've kind of told myself that
Yeah.
after these next two games, I might be trying to do like VR only for the next year.
Oh,
I will
interesting.
also say I'll
Yeah.
plug one other game that I just played through that I forgot about because I burned through it. and it's kind of been like a year of remakes. There are a lot of remakes out right now. But the Metroid Prime remake on Switch was, I mean, Metroid Prime is like probably one of my favorite top 10 games for sure. And the remake was really well done. Like a remaster, I guess you could call it. It was so good. Like, it's funny because I was playing it and being like, oh, like I mean, it looks good, like, but I remember, like, I'm pretty much like know that game inside my head. So I'm like speed running it more or less. And then I
Right.
went back and I was like, how much better does this actually look? And it's so funny how your brain plays tricks on you. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess they like upres some of the textures, right? Or like maybe added some like volumetric lighting. You look at the side by sides between the original like GameCube Metroid Prime and the one they just released on Switch, and it is a huge overhaul. Like the amount of lighting effects, obviously upresing textures, upresing models, like across the board, it looked so much better. But I also just think that is like one of those single player games that we've talked on this podcast several times about. There are not enough hours in the day, and like certain games I would love to play, but I shy away from because I'm just like, honestly, Starfield kind of is one of them for me, where I'm like, I've seen
Yeah.
so much hype about it, and I'm like, I just don't know. Well, I know that I probably would put the hours in. I guess the question is that what I should be doing right now? So
Yeah, I just got a
it's,
handheld system. I got the ROG Ally so that I
oh,
could try to play it
nice.
on the road and everything too. Because
Oh,
yeah,
when
I
you're like sitting
know.
on a plane or,
Yeah, or just even in bed or whatever on the toilet, whatever. It's like
yeah,
Yep.
just get the
wasting time
hours in.
anyways.
But
So,
but yeah, just 'kay, I know I would put the time in no matter what. Like I've put massive amount of hours in the Skyrim and Elder Scrolls Online, and
hell yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
I just finished Cyberpunk 2077 for the first time, and
Yeah.
I did like
Oh,
all the side
really?
missions there. Yeah, I was trying to wait because I have the Series X, right? So I was trying to wait for
Okay.
all the kinks and everything to get out, and then I saw the DLC was coming out, so I'm like, okay, I guess it's probably in a good spot. So I put a lot of time into that one and thought that one was really good. So I'm ready for the DLC for that one with Idris Elba coming up, and then
Mm.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm on a
I'm
yeah,
big
amped
yeah,
Idris Elba.
about that.
I'm on a huge Idris Elba kick recently. I've watched I just watched the Lush. What's he plays like the detective
oh, on
in.
Netflix.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
watched the movie version. Like I watched the show and then I watched the movie, and it was so good. I think and also Hijack, he's killing it in Hijack. I think anything Idris Elba is attached to, I'm like, I'll go watch it and probably love it.
yeah. I mean, the trailer. If you haven't seen the trailer, I mean, it looks interesting. I'm not sure how much Keanu's in there, but it seems like it's more
Mm.
Idris Elba all this time.
Nice.
So
I'll probably replay it. I beat it in like 2 weeks as soon as it came out. I played it with all the bugs and everything, and and I still enjoyed it. I was surprised it got so much hate. I think some people just had a longer hype period than I
yeah,
did, but I mean, I heard about it and then 2 months before it came out, and then was like just blasted through it.
What
And
did you play it on? You guys both didn't
I
play it
played
on
it on
PC, right?
PC. I
Okay.
did. I played it on PC because I felt like that was the only, thankfully, because I had a PlayStation 5 at the time, or it might have still been a 4, but everybody that bought the game, they refunded their money and then
yeah,
took it off
yep.
the PlayStation store. So
Wow.
I
That's, I
am
mean,
so glad I decided to just do it on PC.
for a AAA title, I mean, that is not a good look to be like, yeah, I guess we'll just reimburse everyone. That
Yeah,
Yeah.
must have
I
had some
mean,
serious flaws.
I
Yeah, it
expected not to
became
play that one for a
interesting
while
because
anyway, because like I played The Witcher 3, and same thing happened
mm,
when that game came out, and it didn't become good till maybe like 2 years after, once they got all the bugs out, and they re-released it as the Game of Year edition, and everybody's like, "Oh, The Witcher 3 is awesome." So I kind of felt like where Project Red, it seems like that's like par for the course for them. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like don't jump
mm,
in day one, maybe wait at least a year for them to get all the bugs out, and then it's usually pretty good.
yeah.
I also recently played a game called Deathloop. I don't know if you've
Oh,
ever heard of
yep,
it.
Oh
yeah, I beat
yeah.
that one too. Yeah, that was
Dude,
really good.
Deathloop was one of those games that like I think I bought it because it was on sale in the Steam store, and I'd just gotten off like a pretty. I usually game like after an intense project. I give myself a
Right.
week to be like, I'm just gonna dial back the hours I'm doing work and try to give my brain a bit of a break. And Deathloop was one of those games where I picked it up and was like, I did not expect to like it as much as I did. And talk about like that is a great example of a unique story, unique style, like art style.
Mm-hmm.
Like the stuff that pulled me in was not what normally would. I mean, I guess it's part of what pulls me into a video game, but I think Deathloop is one of those kind of. I don't want to say it flew under the radar because I know a lot of people were talking about it, but like that game was dope. I thought that was so much fun.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
I
like a
went
quick
into it.
play, like you don't have to like it's not all consuming, you know.
Yeah, I know I went into it really hyped up. 'Cause I like Arcane Studios. Like I played and beat all the Dishonored games, and once that one came out, I was like, okay, this is gonna be dope. And it was getting 10 out of 10 reviews at a lot of places, a lot of
Oh,
outlets. And
true.
so I went in really excited and I played the first couple of missions and I'm like, man, I don't think I like this at all. But I kept with it. And once I understood what was actually going on, I'm like, oh, this is actually really intelligent and really dope. Because at first, you think it's just a linear game, but it's like, no, you have to really think about the time loop elements and really set up
Right, because
where the people are going to
it
be and stuff.
resets it resets the objectives, right? So like you'll like
Yep,
achieve one thing, but then the death loop hits, and so then it's like, okay, you lose that progress. Like there are certain things that were retained, but you lose like key points of progress, and so
right,
you keep going back into this loop, and then you're like, okay, like order of operations, how do I get to all the stuff I've already done while simultaneously trying
right.
to get it like
Mm.
from a game dev standpoint and like just the overall story structure, it was wild. And great voice acting
Yeah,
too, I thought.
yeah. The acting was great. Like I wish it got more accolades than it did, but I can see where people are kind of thrown off because it's not your typical linear game. It's like you really have to be invested in the story and really figure out what's going on because if you're just going through and the time loop is keep resetting and you're like what the heck happened to all my progress is like you have to read all the side notes and
Yeah,
kind of like listen to the audio tapes and really get invested in the story there.
for sure. Did you
Mm.
I was also going to say anyone play, or I've only read about it and I've been reading a lot about it cuz it's much like Deathloop, like it sounds like an interesting sort of game structure, but the latest Baldur's Gate, which I never
I
played any
Oh
of
yeah,
want
those.
Baldur's
to.
Gate 3, yeah. I
I'm
haven't played it yet,
excited
but
about it. My friend, my wife's sister, she has I guess like sister-in-law, but she's been playing it and she had the beta like a while ago and she says it's awesome, like super
yeah, that's what
cool.
I hear.
Definitely, yeah, man, I'm amped about it. Damn, I'm probably not going to be doing the VR for a year, but
And I think the reason that I bring up Baldur's
see when
Gate
it
2
gets.
is I read, I don't know, it was someone on the game dev team, someone pretty high up on the game dev team of that said something to the effect of like it's not you shouldn't go into this game and feel like you put in 5 hours and you have to stick with like the class and everything that you built. Like if anything, it should be a game where if you get to that far, 5-6 hours in and you're like, oh, I've suddenly realized like this isn't the build that I wanted, like starting over is totally acceptable.
Right.
Which
Mm.
I guess you get an element of that sometimes with like I grew up like just RPGs in general, Final Fantasy being like one of my favorite series, but it sounds like there is even more of a layer of like once you start building a character and getting to that, more progressed stage in the game, like you should feel good about like, oh, well, maybe it's just not your build and then go back and start over, which again, to
Right.
the
Mm.
conversation about number of hours put in, I was like, I don't know. Sounds like I could put a lot of hours in that game.
Yeah, I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of the games
Yep.
coming out this last half of the year just all seem like 300 plus hour games. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
pick your poison
For
what you want to play.
real.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
yeah,
No,
Remnant
it's
2
interesting.
is up there too. I want to try that, but
Ooh.
that's another like 200-hour game. Then Baldur's Gate,
Mhm.
Starfield. It's just like, yeah.
My
Yeah.
favorite is going and looking at the voice act, like the actual scripts for the games, like the amount of voice actors written lines that they have. Like
Yep.
Cyberpunk, I think they did a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, and it was like they showed just the dialogue for like the top 5 main characters or something, and it's just like a stack of written out scripts. It's like, gosh, the amount of work that goes into a 300-hour game, I mean, it's just unfathomable.
Yeah, because
Mm.
not just linear, like there's different path choices too. Like I played through, I got one ending, and then I'm like, you know what? There's probably 10 other endings that I'm not seeing, and those all have their own trails with their own dialogue. And yeah, that has to be a ton of work there.
Oh man, I
Absolutely.
can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. A short one, if anyone's ever it's a short and sweet one, but it's called Spirit Fair, and
Oh yeah,
yeah, would always recommend that to anybody that wants to have a fun little indie game that's lovely and sweet and just it's a good one. I just beat that maybe a few months ago, so that was a good one. But
Yeah, I have to check
yeah.
it out. I have seen that one around, but I've never picked it up.
Well, speaking of video games, what's the video game you got in the background? That looks like a whole. Is that a what is that? Or
Oh,
is that
that's
a video game? Is that is an arcade?
yeah, no, it's an arcade system. I have random games go up on there. Like I built that arcade with my son a couple years back, so it actually has a
Is it like a
PC in
Raspberry
there.
Pi? Oh,
No,
PC.
it's a full fledged mid tower PC in there, so I could run practically anything on it. So
Hell yeah.
yeah,
I love that.
right now it's just running MAME, which I have it set up to where when I turn it on, like a random game just comes on. So it looks like that's Ghouls and Goblins or Ghouls and Ghosts playing right now. But yeah, I have
Nice.
Ninja Turtles, Simpsons, Galaga, like everything, every arcade
Oh man,
classic on there.
that's what's up. Galaga is my jam, man. That's the game I always go to.
Yep, I did a
Love
lot of
that
retro
one.
gaming up in Canada because there's a lot of those barcades up there. So played a
Yeah.
lot of old school classics.